BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Alright, hello everybody. Today is Friday, an Anything Goes Friday, where any subject is fair game. Welcome to the show. But there are just a couple quick announcements before we begin. The first one is that this weekend there's going to be a very important episode on the murder of Joan Webster. It's turned into an ongoing series here on this channel. What started as a simple bonus episode that took place on the weekend to a regular weekly spot covering the murder of Joan Webster from 1981. I've been corresponding a lot with Eve Carson, who was the sister-in-law of Joan Webster and wrote one of the more famous books on the subject called Mommy's a Mole, once again about the disappearance and murder of her sister-in-law, Joan Webster. And it's going to be done in an entirely different format. It's going to be a much more extensive episode. It'll most likely be out Sunday morning. To anyone who is listening to these episodes as they come out, I invite you to check that out on Sunday. And if you're listening to this in the future, then there is a playlist on this channel about the murder of Joan Webster from 1981. I invite you to visit that as well. Alright, now on to the second notification. I have to give another shout out to YouTube user Pedro Fernandez, who sent me a big list of suggestions on how to improve the channel. And one of them was to create an outro, like you hear the introduction at the beginning, like an outroduction, for lack of a better term. And I'm going to play that for you in just a second, only because this is the first time that it's ever been used on the channel, and I would invite you guys to give some feedback. What do you think about that? How does it sound? Is there anything that you would change? I mean, there's still a copy that can be edited. So right now, I'm going to play the outro that's going to be used at the end of Black Box Online Radio episodes, and please stick around for the end of the show so that you can hear the outro more than once. Okay, without further ado, what do you think of this?
This has been a production of Black Box Online Radio, hosted by Ned. Thanks for tuning in. Black Box Online Radio comes to you 3 times a week, covering serial killers and true crime, but any subject is fair game.
So see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time. Okay, so what do you think of that? Any feedback is welcome. Please put that in the comment section below. And now moving on to today's topic. This one comes to us from Mr. JSV650, who says, "Hey Ned, have you watched The Ghosts of Highway 20? Could be an interesting episode." And as you can hear, this is one that was requested by one of the listeners. If there's anything that you would like covered on the channel, please put your idea in the comment section as well, and I will try to get to it. However, I do confess the topic list is getting rather big. And at the time that Mr. JSV had requested that one, no, I had not heard of The Ghosts of Highway 20, so I put it into Google, and I wasn't sure what to find. Is this going to be an actual paranormal event? Is this going to be some type of work of fiction? This channel has delved into the paranormal just a little bit last year. There are a handful of episodes that are not exactly dealing with ghosts, but more or less challenging somebody's ghost story. Because I said once, in 2018, that when people have true crime theories, no matter what it is, you have to approach the true crime world with a certain sense of, well, just that sensitivity. But when it comes to the paranormal, oh yes, I'm going to criticize your ghost story. And I'll include a link to one of them that was done last year called The Haunting of Sloss Furnace. I have somewhat of a personal connection to that one, and you can hear all about that in the episode. The graphic that you're looking at now was actually made for that episode, The Haunting of Sloss Furnace. It's from Alabama. And on to today's material, there was a search result that just seemed to be overwhelmingly dominating Google when I put this in, and it was talking all about this album that had been made by somebody named Lucinda Williams called Ghosts of Highway 20. And I also had never heard of her before. I had never heard of the her music. I know nothing about her. I haven't even heard any of those songs. And I was like, well, is this fictional? I mean, what really is this? And it actually seems like a name that is used by many things. While I'm not familiar with Lucinda Williams, I do watch the show Clarice, which is from CBS, but I get it on Paramount Plus. And episode 2 of Clarice was also titled Ghosts of Highway 20. It's a great name, I do say that. But this is indeed a true story, and it is the story of John Arthur Ackroyd, someone who may have been a prolific serial killer who was operating in the northwest of the United States, in Oregon nonetheless. And the first sources that I found about the Ghost of Highway 20 were not from YouTube, but from all of the articles that had been written by the Oregonian. I really do thank them for their coverage. And then I very quickly got onto YouTube and I saw that, I'm sure what Mr. JSV 650 was talking about. There is a documentary out there that is available for free on YouTube. It's about 2 hours long, called The Ghost of Highway 20, and it has over 10 million views at the time of this recording. So big thank you to the Oregonian as well for being behind that film. And they did say very clearly that the name does come from Lucinda Williams. But this is the story of John Aykroyd and his victims. And because the Oregonian and Oregon Live were so big on the coverage, I would like to use one of their introductions here. And this is one that is simply called Ghosts of Highway 20. Along a stretch of Oregon Highway, women vanished. Some were assaulted, others murdered, and some are still missing. One man might be responsible for it all. And I really was surprised that a publication that is mostly centered on news is taking a true crime theory and really trying to argue the case. But the point is, though, they actually did make somewhat of a compelling case that this guy, John Arthur Ackroyd, could have been heavily involved with disappearances, rapes, and even murders. I also found this article from a publication called Neiman News, Neiman. Neiman News. I had never heard of this news outlet before, but it appears they are connected to Harvard University, and this one was written by Chip Scanlon, who also shares some introductory notes. Over 2 decades, 4 women disappeared and 1 was raped off of this same stretch of road in rural Oregon. Their stories have another connection. One man is linked to all 5 crimes. His name was John Arthur Ackroyd, who had joined the ranks of Ted Bundy, the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway, and other notorious predators who trolled the Pacific Northwest for vulnerable and marginalized women. Now, before we go any further in the discussion, I think that there's an important thing to say about geography. Someone was even asking a question during Wednesday's AMA about all the things that are happening in West Virginia. Why do these true crime incidents happen in these places? And I think geography is a big reason. Poverty is another one for here in West Virginia. But in the Pacific Northwest, on both the American side and the Canadian side, it's a little bit different. There are just countless sources out there about the Highway of Tears in Canada, particularly the story of Amber Tucker, which has been covered on this channel. And in Canada, the long story short is, there are major cities in the western part of Canada, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, but they are few and far between. There are an enormous amount of miles or kilometers in between each city. So one of the ways that people get from place to place is through hitchhiking, and it puts people in some vulnerable positions, particularly women. And one of the saddest, most disgusting things that I read about the Highway of Tears once is that the reason why many people target women along that highway is not only are they in a vulnerable place, but the soil is very soft. It's easy to shovel, so it makes the disposal of bodies more practical, absolutely sickening. But you can see that this article is already introducing the subject in a very similar way. There is this highway in eastern Oregon that is not very well monitored, that when people are out there, there's nobody around for miles. And another sad fact about humanity is I was actually reading this on a thread about the Second Amendment, but I won't even get into that territory. But somebody simply said, when you live off the grid in the absolute wilderness, you need to carry a firearm, not for protection of predators, although that is completely true, predators such as bears and wolves, right? But you need to carry a firearm to protect yourself from people, because people will try and do things to you if they think they can get away with it. If they believe that the police are not very close by, or they believe that there are not going to be consequences for their actions, and they're on some place like a rural highway in eastern Oregon or in Canada or even rural parts of West Virginia where I'm from, then people are going to try and commit crimes if they think there are not consequences. It's just a sad fact of life. And it appears that some of these women may have fallen into a vulnerable position, but we're going to see that this story is so much bigger than just an opportunistic serial killer who's driving up and down Highway 20 looking for a woman to be jogging by herself or walking by herself. This story is so much bigger. And that's actually the very next line here that they say in this article. It was just a hell of a story, and it had to be told. We went back through clips. Investigative reporters had covered this, and they had written episodically about it, but nobody had put it all together until the Oregonian composed their documentary, Ghosts of Highway 20. The Oregonian went to court to open a sealed case revealing for the first time that John Arthur Ackroyd had entered a no-contest plea in the murder of his own 13-year-old stepdaughter. And that is another element that I said is so much larger than just preying on women in a vulnerable position, because John Aykroyd was also accused of that, and her name was Rashandra Pickle. She's often referred to as Chandra Pickle in many of the sources, and her brother Byron was interviewed in this documentary that was put out by the Oregonian. There are many interview clips that feature his testimonials, and as someone who knew John Arthur Ackroyd personally, Byron says very clearly that he was abusive. He definitely had all the warning signs of behavior, and that this is something that isn't quite an enormous shock. But here's another thing that is so important to talk about, and Byron was the one who articulated this very well and also very honestly, because if this guy's abusive, why didn't the kid say anything, or why didn't Chandra say anything if she is the victim of his abuse? And he brought up a point that I think needs to be reiterated more frequently. And when people are children or adolescents or teenagers, or maybe even to their early 20s, you can even think back about your own life. Why don't people come forward because of abuse? Some people think that embarrassment and shame is one thing. Other people think that it's consequences, that the situation is going to blow up and it's going to become worse, or the person who is abusing them might do something even worse to them if they are exposed, or that they will try to get revenge and retaliate in an even more sinister way. All of those things are true, but another one is when the victim is not being abused, they just want to resume normal life. And I said, think back about your own life, whether it's dealing with someone like a schoolyard bully, or perhaps someone who was doing lots of teasing, or maybe just someone who was pretending to be a friend, and they were doing many rude and nasty things, and they were doing it all under the guise of rough humor. And when those things are happening that are bothering you, just stop. Like, you go home, and but you don't tell anyone about it because you want to resume normal life. Like, when the abuse isn't happening, that's your only opportunity to resume normal life. And I do not blame the victims, no matter who they are, for a second. We do not need to live in a world where you blame the victims for anything. I mean, that is just absolutely uncalled for, so I can completely comprehend why people do not speak out more, because it's the abusers that we should be blaming, and I think we'll just leave it at that. But on to the next story, which is from a different woman, and this is also from the Neiman article. They tracked down somebody named Marlene Gabrielson, who could have easily been the killer's first victim, but managed to escape after Ackroyd brutally raped her in 1977. The police didn't believe Gabrielson's accusations at the time, and her case, which bookends the series, is an example of justice long overdue. Marlene Gabrielson was interviewed in that Oregonian documentary, Ghosts of Highway 20, and when I was listening to her tell the story, I thought of another thing that is so important to remember about serial killers. When she was approached by this guy, John Aykroyd, she said there was not an ounce of danger in his presence. Everything seemed so calm and welcoming and plain and ordinary and normal. She wasn't threatened by him. Now, I want you to make your own assessment to what you hear right now, but somebody once told me that I have the voice of a serial killer, that my voice sounds like the way a serial killer would talk, and my simple response to them was, oh no, The overwhelming majority of the time, serial killers don't have a creepy voice or anything that is even going to make you think twice about them, and this is a perfect example. This is a perfect case in point of how someone was able to put the victim at ease. There is no threatening element. This is how somebody like that would operate. And I have to cite Lyndon Lafferty, who's the author of the book, The Zodiac Killer Cover-Up, also known as The Silence Badge, who talked about this as well, when he said that certain people who would develop these destructive tendencies also learn how to put on a comforting facade. In short, a woman is going to get into a vehicle with the serial killer when they wouldn't normally accept a ride from this person. A woman is going to go walking with the serial killer when she wouldn't go walking with any ordinary stranger. This person is very good at putting people at ease, and that is how they gain access to their victims. Ted Bundy was an excellent example of this. When they mentioned Ted Bundy at the beginning of the article, he would have a very almost unique ability to put on the superficial charm. Glib and superficial charm is actually one of the hallmarks of being a psychopath or a sociopath. But with Bundy, once you could see that, well, he's a serial killer and you can see right through him, he's just a disgusting piece of slime. But I would like to go back to the article now. In the end, they identified 4 victims who investigators believe died by John Aykroyd's hands and documented a history of police and prosecutorial, I butchered that word, prosecutorial incompetence that allowed Ackroyd to go on a killing spree for 2 decades. Investigators believe that he killed an unknown number of victims whose remains are scattered off of Highway 20, a 2-lane road that crosses central Oregon west to east, often disappearing into the shadowy, dense evergreen forests. Geography. The interconnection is very limited, as well as being far away from law enforcement. And it really is quite remarkable to see the videography in the Oregonian documentary Ghosts of Highway 20, but the reason why they have remarkable videography is because it's an isolated, secluded place. 5 women's stories forge the chronicle spine of Ghosts of Highway 20. But an important thing to share right now is that, alright, they're attributing multiple deaths to this guy, John Arthur Ackroyd. However, he was only convicted on 1 murder, and that is why he was sentenced to, and that's why he was serving time in prison. It was for 1 murder, and let's talk about her. I would like to go over to an article from pointer.org that gives some detail on the murder of Kay Turner. On Christmas Eve, 1978, Kay Turner went on a run on a remote road off of Highway 20 and never returned. Buried inside the case file of her murder, they found the rape report of Marlene Gabrielson, that woman we said that was attacked by John Aykroyd but was able to get away. Gabrielson reported that John Arthur Ackroyd had raped her while giving her a ride home along Highway 20. He was never prosecuted. And in the Oregonian documentary Ghosts of Highway 20, they also wanted to bring up the point that Marlene Gabrielson was a Native American, also Alaskan Native, and she thinks that her indigenous heritage was one of the reasons why the authorities did not listen to her. Many of the victims on the Highway of Tears in Canada that I was talking about at the beginning are also indigenous women. So, had she been believed, she said, Kay, Turner, and the other women who encountered Ackroyd may have lived. Well, of course, then they could have put the guy in jail. I would now like to go to an article from smith.edu that talks about the events that happened in Ackroyd's trial. John Aykroyd was never brought to justice for Marlene's rape. He went on to rape and kill Kay Turner, a stranger he stalked while she was on a run. Later his stepdaughter, Rashonda Pickle, vanished from the family's home in a desolate outpost off of the highway. And another point about that is that John Aykroyd worked for the Department of Transportation, and there is something that I was going to say later on, but one of the odd things about this case is even though he was sentenced and he was serving time in prison, he was still collecting a pension of $3,600 because he was a Department of Transportation employee, and their simple response to that was that, well, he filled out the paperwork, so there wasn't anything that was barring him from collecting that pension. And that was from, I want to cite the source on that one. It was something called the Madras Report or something, but definitely had the name Madras in the title and of the or the name of the publication rather. So that is just an odd tidbit. But what happened to Marlene was a shock to the conscience, and yet it lay buried amid old court records. She reported her assault only to be treated as a liar, and searching for clues to unsolved murders, we stumbled upon a story that was as relevant to this era as any believer era would be, as it was 40 years ago. Women like Marlene who are victimized by male predators are often not believed when they report harassment, assault, or rape. As a result, they often feel forsaken. They feel like ghosts. And that's another reason why you hear the name Ghost of Highway 20 there. But this story does not end here, and in fact it's going to keep going in a few different directions. So I would invite everybody to please stay tuned, and even if there's something that you've been thinking about already, you can put that in the comments section below, but I'll be right back after this quick message.
Follow BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram.
You are listening to Black Box Online Radio.
This show is brought to you by TeeSpring. Feel free to check out the merchandise. Almost all sizes and colors are listed.
Black Box Online Radio.
And remember YouTube Premium. You can download the show, take it on the go, anywhere and anyhow.
Please like and subscribe. Grazie mille.
Okay, hello, and we are back. I would like to continue with one of the crimes that was attributed to John Arthur Ackroyd, a crime that he wasn't convicted of. It was the one where he entered the plea of no contest just prior to his death, and yes, John Aykroyd passed away in prison, and this is the disappearance of his stepdaughter, Rashonda Pickle. And there's a page about her on the Charlie Project, and I would like to read off the details of disappearance that they have posted there. Rashonda was last seen watching television at her family's residence on the Santiam Pass in Sweet Home, Oregon, at 10 a.m. on July 10, 1990. She has never been heard from again. Her mother was at work at the time of her disappearance. Rashonda's stepfather, John Arthur Ackroyd, is the last person known to have seen her. He said he came home during a break from work and asked Rashonda if she wanted to go for a ride with him. She said no, and he left. When he returned to the house at approximately 12:45 p.m., Rashonda had vanished. Her mother and stepfather didn't report her missing until the next day. For years, Ackroyd was the prime suspect in Rashonda's case, and her family believed he had murdered her. He didn't seem upset that she was missing, and police were suspicious because he knew her weight and bra size, but not her birthday. Oh my gosh, that's just absolutely sickening. Prior to her disappearance, Rashonda and her brother regularly went to school with bruises. She told her friends that Ackroyd had caused the injuries. She was afraid to go home from school. As a result, she often spent nights at friends' homes. And this ties into the segment that I said at the beginning about the reasons why people do not make more formal reports of abuse. Photos of Ackroyd are posted with this summary. After Rashanda disappeared, he and her mother separated, and her mother moved to California and remarried. In 1992, Ackroyd was sentenced to 5 life terms for the unrelated murder of Kay Jean Turner, who was abducted and murdered in 1978. Ackroyd found her body 8 months later and was under suspicion in her case for many years, but he wasn't convicted in her death until 1994. Another man was also convicted in Turner's death, and that was something that I wanted to point out. Ackroyd definitely had an accomplice in all of this, and well, I don't mean to deviate too much from the story of Rachanda Pickle, but I think we covered a lot of the major step-by-step details. Big thank you to the Charlie Project, but I would like to go back to some things that were shared there about the murder of Kay Turner, because they dropped a lot of the important pieces of info. So let's look at that. One article that I thought was very helpful in reading up on this was from pamplinmedia.com, and it shares a lot of things about the murder of Kay Turner. Firstly, it says, a man was convicted of the December 24th, 1978 murder of a jogger at Camp Sherman, Oregon, died last week in a cell in prison, and this was published in 2017, of course. But the important details about the investigation and how everything played out is laid out later on in the article. Kay Turner was staying with her husband, Noel, and another group in a cabin at Camp Sherman in Oregon for the Christmas holidays in 1978, when she went out for a 1-hour jog at about 8:30 in the morning. By 11 a.m., her husband and 2 friends had been driving around looking for her, searching the area, fearing she was injured. Around 2 p.m., the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office was notified, and an official search started. Search and rescue personnel and volunteers on the ground, assisted by bloodhounds and aircraft, made their way around. It was unseasonably warm, around 53 degrees in Madras that day, and Turner was wearing yellow and blue running shorts, as well as a matching shirt. So, this will introduce the accomplice that was involved with the murder of Kay Turner, and his name is Roger Dale Beck. During the investigation, police spoke to John Aykroyd, who had been in the area and said that he had spoken to Kay Turner, but his friend, Roger Dale Beck, who lived in Sisters at the time, provided an alibi for him. The 2 men worked for the highway department at Santiam Junction and eventually confessed to poaching in the area. Another 5 days later, the search was called off, but law enforcement continued to look into the matter. More than 7 months later, on August 12, 1979, Ackroyd reported that he was walking his dog and came upon the yellow shorts and some bone fragments in the area. He also tried to collect money from a group that had set up a reward for information on Turner, but was turned down because of the group's suspicions of Ackroyd. I mean, if everything they're saying about this guy is true, he absolutely seems like he deserves to rot in one of the hotter places in hell, because it's just so evil. Even those details you were hearing about his stepdaughter, and almost certainly being involved with this murder, being convicted of the murder of Kay Turner, but trying to claim the reward money for anything that would lead to trying to solve the case. I mean, what is wrong with humanity? That often is a question that we ask on this channel. How do these things happen? And usually with serial killers, it comes from a pattern of genetics, neurological issues, and experiencing either a lot of child abuse growing up or also some type of lack of bonding with the parents. And in many cases, it is both. A little more than a year later, on October 4th, 1980, a deer hunter found Turner's skull about 3/4 of a mile from that location, but in accounts of the story in the Madras Pioneer, officials had found no evidence of foul play. Over most of the next decade, investigators had their suspicions, but they never had enough evidence to charge anyone with the crime. But On July 10, 1990, that changed when Ackroyd's 13-year-old stepdaughter, Rachanda Pickle, who lived with him and her mother near the Santiam Pass, went missing. Once again, Ackroyd was the last person to have seen her. For the next 23 months, investigators put together a case against Ackroyd and Beck, whose ex-wife told them that she had overheard a conversation in the mountains. Forensics later revealed that Turner had been raped and stabbed and beaten. Ackroyd of Sweet Home, Oregon, and Beck of Porterville, California, were both age 42 at the time, and they were arrested on June 12 of 1992 and charged with the rape and murder of Turner. So, that's, like, as I said, almost certainly it seems like John Aykroyd was involved with that. But that was the only murder that he was convicted of. I tend to lean toward the fact that he would have been convicted of some sort of foul play involving his stepdaughter if he had lived long enough to face the trial for this. And there, some of the things, though, to jump ahead, is that yes, Ackroyd passed away in prison already a couple of years ago, and his accomplice Beck was also sentenced to life in prison on January 3rd, 1994, and remains incarcerated at the Oregon State Penitentiary. Oregon State, though, this article also says, is the state's only maximum security prison, houses over 2,000 male inmates, and is surrounded by a 25-foot high wall. Okay, though, big thank you to this, the Madras Pioneer. That was the name of the publication that I was trying to remember earlier, but this is from Pamplin, pamplinmedia.com, and this one was written by Holly M. Gill. Big thank you to her, published January 4th, 2017. There really is a very sick and sinister element associated with John Aykroyd, but in terms of any type of response, I would want to say that he thought he could get away with things. And I have to go back to these basic points of the terrain, of the geography and topography of the land. He probably thought no one is going to find the body out there unless I say something. Nobody is going to know where to look in the woods. This is a very secluded area. I have the cover of the forest, and there are so many ways in which I can hide and ways in which I can dispose of not only the body of Kay Turner, but perhaps countless other women. And if you go to John Aykroyd's Wikipedia, you will see that his body count is listed as 1+. Nobody has any idea how many people he was actually involved with their murders with, because his accomplice there, was also involved with the murder of Kay Turner, this guy Beck. How many other people did they go after? It really is a mystery within itself. And I do thank the Oregonian for trying to learn more about this and putting out this documentary, Ghosts of Highway 20, which is done in multiple segments, and then they stitched it all together, and then they put it out on YouTube, and you can see it for free. But this is something that should not be downplayed. It should not be thought of as any type of lesser crime. Some people might hear that, oh, he's a serial killer, but they can only confirm that he committed one murder. It sounds like somebody found a very methodical way of slipping through the cracks, like always having some type of explanation. Perhaps his work as a member of the Department of Transportation also allowed him to learn about the places in which he could hide the bodies, hide the skeletal remains, so they wouldn't be found. But there's also a point here that I think is important to share, and that is that the skull of Kay Turner was found first, and then later on her remains were discovered. That is something that we also experienced in the murder of Joan Webster from 1981, and her remains found in 1990. This is often attributed to four-legged creatures, animals pulling up the bones and moving them to different places. So I think you can get the idea there, and that actually unearths some of the hidden remains. But there was another similarity that I noticed between the murder of Joan Webster, which we're going to talk about on Sunday, and the murder of Kay Turner, and that is that the prime suspect in the murder of Kay Turner, John Aykroyd, whom we've been discussing, was convicted of one murder, but they attributed other murders to him. The same thing happened to the prime suspect in the murder of Joan Webster, named Leonard Paradiso, and he was convicted of one murder, the 1979 murder of Marie Iannuzzi, which occurred in this same year. And then he was he had other crimes attributed to him. The serial killer Wayne Williams had many of the Atlanta child murders attributed to him, but he wasn't convicted on all of them. This happens very frequently. And the last thing I would like to do is to go over to an article that was published in the Seattle Times in February of 2020 in conjunction with the Associated Press, and it talks about the other person, Roger Beck. Roger Beck's bid for eventual release has been rejected again by the Oregon Board of Parole and Post-Prison Supervision, which found Thursday that he was convicted of the 1978 murder of Kay Turner, and he had taken few steps to improve himself over the years. It was Beck's fourth time asking the board to deem him likely to be rehabilitated, a finding that would have cleared him, and he would have found a way for eventual parole. The Oregonian and Oregon Live reported. Each time, the board has rejected his request, concluding that Beck, now age 70, has failed to accept responsibility for his role in Kay Turner's murder, and that he had not meaningfully participated in self-improvement programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous in prison. Turner, age 35, of Eugene, Oregon, vanished while running along an isolated road in Camp Sherman, Oregon, in Jefferson County. And, okay, so that's what happened to the accomplice, still in prison to this day, in a maximum security prison. And, of course, John Aykroyd passed away in jail behind bars, in a private cell nonetheless. He died alone just after, in the early AM hours, I think it was just after midnight, and they still had to conduct an investigation all the same when there was a prison death like that, but it doesn't appear that there's anything suspicious about his death. He was just getting into his elderly years. But the concluding note really is that people are going to do evil things if they think they can get away with it. And not only that, but also they are going to try and get off on the power, because a big characteristic of the serial killer is they desire power. Those three reasons why people commit crimes, right? Money, sex, and power. I mean, what did I call it before? The true crime trinity of sexual deviance. Out of money, sex, and power, what does the serial killer think about the most? Power. Yes, of course, there are angles that are sexual, such as the rape of Kay Turner, and of course money can be involved as well. You heard that John Aykroyd tried to claim the reward money, but these are about power, because this person wants to commit the crime, and he wants to be the person who knows everything, and he can control how other people will learn about it. Because he's the one who's saying, hey, I found this pair of yellow shorts. Not only did he want to commit the crime and commit the rape and commit the murder, but also he wanted to lead people to the body, to deceive them, to get off the hook, and all the while pulling the wool over their eyes, thinking, ah ha ha, I'm so much smarter than you, I know more than you, I know what truly happened and you don't. I have things that you don't. I have abilities and you don't. I can gain the reward money for the murder of Kay Turner because I've outsmarted you, I committed this horrible crime, I got away with it, I'm rubbing it in your face, I am flaunting it right in front of you. So that is how I think many serial killers operate. All of those things are a form of power tripping. The attempts to gain the money and the attempts to gain the sex are just different ways in which this person wants to have power and control over other people. And I frequently cite Dr. Julie Armstrong, who said that the serial killer wants other people to feel powerless because they felt powerless as a child. Almost certainly there are cases of abuse between parent and child, and that they want to recreate this cycle of abusive and destructive behaviors because that's what was done to them as a kid. Now they want to get revenge on women, or revenge on humanity, revenge on society, revenge on someone. They want to blame somebody else because they are the victims of this type of abuse. Now they want to inflict it upon other people. But there is also that very famous proverb that the child who is not loved by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. In an episode on What Causes Evil in Society, that was the title of it, I talked about how the serial killer also seems to show this type of tendency where they actually want to be desired and accepted, and they want people to be around them and to appreciate them. But because of the abuse that they experienced as kids, they feel so unworthy that they will desire to be with people, but once they are actually around somebody, then they feel like they have to destroy them, or they desire to even obtain somebody, but they feel that they are so unworthy because of the abuse that they experience between parent and child as a kid that they have to destroy because that's all they know how to do. They know how to pull people into the destructive web. They know how to use their destructive tendencies to gain power. It's called breaking the law. I mean, as simple and pathetic as it sounds, yeah, they know how to break the law and get away with it for a little while. But John Aykroyd was running his mouth, and he started saying things that ended up incriminating him, and he was sentenced to multiple life sentences for the murder of Kay Turner. He never got out of prison, and it looks like his associate Beck will not get out of prison either. So those are just some concluding notes that I wanted to share about serial killers. Thank you so much to everyone who has listened to this. One more time, the email address for the show is blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. You can also find it on Facebook and Instagram, blackboxned88 on Instagram. And we'll listen to that outro one more time. Okay, that's all from me now.
This has been a production of Black Box Online Radio, hosted by Ned. Thanks for tuning in. Black Box Online Radio comes to you 3 times a week, covering serial killers and true crime, but any subject is fair game.
So see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.